the glitz and glamour of the music industry. Behind the spotlight, sold-out shows, and chart-topping hits, lies a world of secrecy, deception, and excess. This is a story of the darker side of the music industry, where fame and fortune come with a steep price. Meet Tyler, a talented young artist who had just landed a record deal with a major label. Overnight, he was catapulted into a world of fame and excess. His social media following skyrocketed, and he found himself performing in front of thousands of adoring fans. But with fame comes pressure, and Tyler soon found himself struggling to keep up with the demands of his label. He was expected to produce hit after hit, and his creative freedom was slowly suffocated by the label's commercial interests. To cope with the stress, Tyler turned to drugs. At first, it was just a recreational thing, but soon he found himself relying on them to get through performances, interviews, and even everyday life. His label and management team turned a blind eye as long as the hits kept coming. As Tyler's fame grew, so did his ego. He began to believe he was invincible and that the rules didn't apply to him. He started womanizing, using his fame and charm to lure women into his bed. He would promise them the world, but once he got what he wanted, he would discard them like yesterday's trash. But Tyler's appetite for women wasn't just about sex. He loved the attention, the adoration, and the feeling of power that came with it. He would often have multiple women on the go at the same time, using his charm and good looks to keep them all in line. And then there were the side chicks, women who knew they were never going to be the main event, but were happy to settle for the crumbs. They would do anything to get a piece of Tyler, even if it meant sharing him with other women. Despite his questionable behavior, Tyler's music continued to top the charts. He lived a lavish lifestyle, with a mansion, fancy cars, and a private jet at his disposal. He would often flaunt his wealth on social media, posting pictures of his luxurious lifestyle for all to see. But behind the scenes, Tyler's life was a mess. He was struggling with addiction. His relationships were shallow and unfulfilling, and he felt like he was losing himself in the process. He longed for something more meaningful, something that would bring him true happiness. This is Maya, a rising star, known for her powerful voice and introspective songwriting. But despite her growing success, Maya found herself stuck in a rut. She was torn between her music career and her tumultuous relationships. Maya had just gone through a messy breakup with her boyfriend, a fellow musician who had been unfaithful to her. She was heartbroken, but she couldn't seem to shake off the feeling that she was to blame for the breakup. To make matters worse, Maya's label was breathing down her neck, demanding that she produce a new album. But Maya was struggling to find inspiration, and her creative well had run dry. She felt like she was losing herself in the process, and that her music was suffering as a result. Here's Jamal, a young rapper named Jamal. Jamal was known for his flashy music videos, his extravagant lifestyle, and his constant need for validation on social media. He would often post pictures of his luxurious cars, his designer clothing, and his lavish vacations, captioning them with boasts about his wealth and success. But despite his tough exterior, Jamal was struggling. He was deeply insecure, and he felt like he needed to constantly prove himself to others. He was addicted to the validation of his fans, and he would do anything to get their attention. Jamal's music was shallow and materialistic, reflecting his own superficial values. He rapped about money, cars, and women, but he never touched on anything meaningful or substantial. Despite his lack of depth, Jamal's music was popular, and he became a fixture on the hip-hop scene. He would often perform at high-profile events, and he would always make sure to bring his A game. But behind the scenes, Jamal was struggling. He was deeply in debt, and he was barely scraping by. He was living in a rented mansion, driving a leased car, and wearing borrowed jewelry. He was a fake, and he knew it. As the music industry continued to evolve, a young female artist named Sophia struggled to find her footing. Despite her talent, dedication, and hard work, her career wasn't taking off as she had hoped. Sophia had always dreamed of becoming a successful singer-songwriter. She had grown up listening to her idols, studying their music, and practicing her craft. After years of performing at local gigs and open mic nights, Sophia finally landed a record deal with a small independent label. However, Despite her excitement and anticipation, Sophia's debut album failed to gain traction. The label didn't provide the support she needed, and the album's promotion was lackluster. Sophia was left to fend for herself, trying to navigate the complex and competitive music industry. She spent countless hours promoting her music on social media, engaging with fans, and seeking out new opportunities. She played gigs wherever she could, from small clubs to festivals, but the crowds were often sparse and unresponsive. Sophia began to doubt herself and her abilities. She felt like she was doing everything right, but somehow, it just wasn't working out. She struggled to make ends meet, working multiple part-time jobs to supplement her meager music income. Despite her frustrations and disappointments, Sophia refused to give up. She continued to write and record music, pouring her heart and soul into every song. She collaborated with other artists, seeking out new perspectives and inspiration. Meet Marcus. He was a charismatic and talented singer-songwriter. He had a voice that could melt hearts, and his music was a fusion of soul, R&B, and pop. Marcus's rise to fame was meteoric. He released his debut single, and it shot to the top of the charts. He became an overnight sensation, and his fans couldn't get enough of him. But behind the scenes, Marcus had a dark secret. He was a manipulator and an abuser, using his charm and charisma to control and exploit those around him. He would often target vulnerable individuals, such as young fans or aspiring artists, and use his power and influence to take advantage of them. Marcus's abuse was subtle, but it was devastating. He would make his victims feel like they were the ones who were crazy, like they were overreacting or being too sensitive. He would gaslight them, deny his own behavior, and shift the blame onto them. As Marcus's fame continued to grow, so did his ego. He became increasingly isolated and paranoid, surrounding himself with yes-men and sycophants who were too afraid to speak truth to power. One Saturday night, as Marcus's performance came to a close, he was met with thunderous applause from the audience. He had always thrived on the attention and adoration of his fans, and tonight was no exception. As he made his way off the stage, he was approached by a beautiful young woman who introduced herself as Sarah. Sarah was a huge fan of Marcus's music, and she had been following him on social media for months. She was bold and confident, and she had no problem approaching Marcus and striking up a conversation. As they talked, Marcus was drawn to her charisma and energy, and he found himself wanting to spend more time with her. As they parted ways, Sarah asked Marcus for his phone number, and he happily obliged. They exchanged a few flirtatious texts over the next few days, and eventually, they decided to meet up for a date. Their first date was a whirlwind romance, with Marcus taking Sarah on a luxurious night out in the city. They dined at a fancy restaurant, went to an exclusive club, and ended the night with a romantic stroll through the park. As the night drew to a close, Marcus walked Sarah back to her apartment, and they shared a passionate kiss on the doorstep. From that moment on, Marcus and Sarah were inseparable. They spent every spare moment together, exploring the city, attending concerts, and just enjoying each other's company. But as their relationship deepened, Marcus's darker side began to emerge. At first, it was just little things. Marcus would make a comment about Sarah's appearance, or he would get angry if she didn't answer his calls right away. But as time went on, his behavior became more and more controlling. He would show up at her apartment unannounced, or he would get angry if she didn't want to have sex. He will sometimes hit her head against the wall, which will instantly make her bleed. But Sarah tried to brush off Marcus's behavior, telling herself that he was just passionate and intense. But deep down, she knew that something was wrong. She felt like she was walking on eggshells around Marcus, never knowing when he would blow up at her. Despite her reservations, Sarah stayed in the relationship, hoping that Marcus would change. Despite her reservations, Sarah stayed in the relationship, hoping that Marcus would change. But as the months went by, his behavior only got worse. He would humiliate her in public, calling her names and making her feel small. He would get angry if she didn't do what he wanted, and he would often leave her feeling scared and alone. As the abuse continued, Sarah began to lose herself. She felt like she was trapped in a nightmare, and she didn't know how to escape. She tried to reach out to her friends and family, but Marcus had isolated her from them, making her feel like she was completely alone. During one of Marcus's house parties, he showed no signs of slowing down. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and the guests were getting more and more rowdy. Marcus, meanwhile, was in his element, laughing and joking with his friends and fans. But amidst all the chaos and revelry, Sarah felt like an outsider. She had been watching Marcus flirt and dance with other women all night, and she couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. She tried to brush it off, telling herself that she was being paranoid, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was ignoring her. As the hours passed, Sarah's feelings of sadness and isolation only intensified. She felt like she was stuck in a nightmare, watching the man she loved flirt and cavort with other people. She tried to hold back tears, but eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. She excused herself and made her way to the balcony, hoping to find some fresh air and a moment of peace. But as she stood there, looking out over the city, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was one of the guys from Marcus's management team, and he was looking at her with a concerned expression. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. "You look like you're really upset." Sarah tried to brush it off, but the guy could see the tears in her eyes. He started consoling her, telling her that she deserved better than to be treated like this. But just as it seemed like Sarah was starting to open up, Marcus appeared out of nowhere. He was furious, his eyes blazing with anger. "What's going on here?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. The guy from the management team tried to explain, but Marcus wasn't having it. He accused Sarah of cheating on him, and then turned to the guy and choked him with the cigar he was smoking. He fortunately fled from Marcus' anger and walked away. Marcus then turned to Sarah furiously. He made a fist to punch Sarah in the face, in a desperate bid to escape. Sarah took a step backwards, but she lost her footing. She fell from the balcony, plummeting to the ground below.